when the NCAA is out to get you, they will get you. For what penalty? It really doesn't matter. You know why? Because when they bait the water, the investigative team of the NCAA has traditionally been the media. They allow the media to bring the evidence. And from there, they get involved and try to hand out the heavy hand. The biggest story right now with Michigan and the sign stealing? Well, you've got
Connor Stallions.
You have Connor Stallions, and he's buying tickets. He's suspended with pay while this investigation goes on by the university, by the athletic department. And Jim Harbaugh sends out a statement saying no knowledge. He wasn't the one that was implementing that. And all the while, videos are now surfacing on social media of Connor Stallions on the sideline next to offensive and defensive coordinators as the opponent is on the field, standing next to those play callers and letting them know as he watches across to the other sideline what signs are coming in. The same sideline that Jim Harbaugh is pacing up and down. So does he know about this? Absolutely he knew about this. And that therein lies the scandal part of where we are with this story. It's so obvious what they're doing in the videos that have surfaced through local TV outlets and more, even dating back to last year's Ohio State matchup, where Stallions is on the other side, on the sideline, staring down what is the Ohio State offensive signal callers. And then as Ohio State turns and looks to the sideline for the signal of what play they're going to run based on the defensive formation, Stallions then turns to the defensive coordinator, and then all of a sudden, what do you see? All these different signals to the Michigan defense on how to adjust to what they just saw on the opposite sideline.
Well, the placard, the really damning piece of evidence is zooming in, which if you're watching, you're seeing on the photo. It's pretty clear when you get really close to it. It's a placard of hand signals and what each one equates to. Getting the signs from other teams and stealing them and showing exactly what's going on. He's also at different times standing next to the defensive coordinator and then going and standing next to the offensive coordinator. This is clear cut. I mean, we can sit here and play the game of, well, innocent until proven guilty and who knows. And you don't hire an analyst from the Naval Academy that lists on their LinkedIn profile they're going to revolutionize the game of football and how they handle intelligence from a Marine Corps standpoint, and then have that person Venmo other scouts and analysts to go to games to scout people and buy one ticket on each side, and then have all of this evidence and multiple Big Ten teams turning you in over it without it being the case. Let's be real honest here. And Michigan fans know it.
Oh, you can see it.
They know they're caught red-handed. They know this is going on. The only fallback for Michigan right now, honestly, and it's an old, tried and true fallback on something is, well, everyone else is doing it. We're not the only ones doing it, right? That's always the thing. We're not the only ones paying players. We're not the only ones doing it. And that is true when it comes to paying players in the past.
Former coaches have admitted to, anonymously, to outlets about what they were doing. There's an ESPN report about what other coaches are saying about sign stealing, and it's going on. The difference is, Chad, you mentioned this earlier in the show. It's not obvious. It's not obvious,
and have you seen I haven't seen many accounts of people saying they went to this extent of buying tickets and going to games and doing that.
Well, there was one account of they wouldn't send staffers; they would send fans.
Yeah,
they would send their fans.
Well, that's the way to do it
on behalf of said program,
and then they could report back. There's an easy way to do this if you have someone attached to the program and they're really good at picking these up. Could just report back face to face or write something down on what it is and what they found and present to you written reports where there's no electronic trail of it. I think what gets me more than anything about this whole Michigan part of it, Hutton, is Jim Harbaugh's just utter lack of regard for authority. I mean, he is God in his eyes. He thinks he's completely right. Nothing he's doing is wrong. He felt that way with the first NCAA investigation. And I'm not here to relitigate what went on with the suspension and the hamburger being paid for. And it wasn't just a hamburger. The NCAA came out and said it was illegal practices during COVID-19 shutdowns. There were a lot of other things that went on with it. But Jim Harbaugh doesn't care. His complete disregard for the rules in this case and how brazen he was with Connor Stallions and how it went down, I don't think he's coaching college football after this year. I've really turned on this to where it's not just he's going to go to the NFL. I think because of a lengthy suspension or possible show cause with this, he's going to be forced to go to the NFL. I think he wants to now anyways because the NCAA does have him in the crosshairs, and they're not going to be done until they get their flesh from him. I think he's gone, but I don't know that he's going to have the option at this point. This looks really bad. Well,
this is just at ESPN. They mentioned Jamie Grant before he entered the Florida House of Representatives. He was on the equipment staff for Auburn football in the early 2000s. And his responsibilities were more than just loading and unloading the bus. He assisted the coaches. And his quote here is, "I was going to hold 2 footballs, and my only job was to try and pick up intel." That's on the record today at ESPN. So, and then the report goes on, Chad. This is through Adam Rittenberg. When it comes to sign stealing in college football, a consensus among coaches about what is unequivocally wrong is hard to find. Grant said Auburn tried to decipher signs only in real time, and because of that, they never felt like they were crossing the line. But talk to enough coaches, and you'll find shades of gray where they search for a competitive advantage. Paranoia is rampant, rationalizing the kind of behavior the American Football Coaches Association Director Todd Berry says is, at the very least, unethical. But unethical and against the rules they're two different things. You know, one is something that's just an unsaid rule, unwritten rule, which is not a rule. Just it's understood you don't do this type of agreement. So it's the straight lie, and it's also just the total disregard for being caught.
And I just don't know that anyone that's gone to this extent.
Well, that's what I mean. And if they have, Chad, they haven't been this stupid about it. Like it's not like Stallions is in the box with binoculars. He is literally right next to the offensive and defensive play caller. And you think it's not like both were in the box. There's a reason why both coordinators are on the sideline, because Connor Stallions wanted to speak to both guys. Sometimes you have the defensive coordinator who wants to be on the sideline with his players. Maybe the OC wants to be up in the box. Not the case here. I don't think there's any coincidence to that.
Allie in the YouTube chat says, this is like the Astros saying everyone else is stealing signs or they were giving them away. Like, what? That's not what we're talking about here.
Well, but there was a rule written that you can't use the electronic feed.
Let's be clear, though, here. Most everyone does try to steal signs.
Right.
That's not a rule in college football. So to say that is correct. When I say, I'm not saying everyone does it. I'm just saying the only fallback that Michigan has in this instance is to go prove a lot of other schools are doing the exact same thing. I don't think they're going to find that. Why? Because I don't think any schools are doing the exact same thing. I think you're going to be hard-pressed to find a program
scouting
dumb enough to hire a kid who legitimately is saying in his bio he's the director of intelligence.
Yeah.
He's a CIA operative for your program. That's what he was hired to do. And for Jim Harbaugh to claim ignorance, it's bad for him. He's lying. That written statement is a lie. He knows what Connor Stallions is up to. He knows what's going on. Look, this is bad for him. I'm not condoning anything going on, but to act like other programs aren't trying to steal signs, Hutton's got the report that's from anonymous coaches about what all they do to try to steal signs. Do I think someone's this dumb about it? No. And here's the part of it that really bothers me about Harbaugh is the compounding factor to it. You were dumb about things that went on with the NCAA investigation that got you pinched for 3 games before. Got your program in some trouble. And then while all this is going on, you never thought, hey, maybe we change his bio online. Or maybe we have Connor not Venmo guys on our staff to go to games to scout signs from opponents in the front row. Maybe we shouldn't be doing that. He never thought that way.
So
That's the problem I have with it.
here's the thing, though. Jim Knowles, who's now the defensive coordinator at Ohio State, told ESPN in December that he estimated 75% of teams sign steal in some form. Keep that in mind. That's the Ohio State defensive coordinator. That was in December. Now
let me ask you this about Ohio State, too.
Go ahead.
When he says that, do you think that Ohio State is one of the 75% that tries to steal signs?
To me, if you're in a Power 5 and if you're keeping up with the Joneses on facilities, you're not going to try to do this as far as the analytical and the intellect would be helpful. Here's the other thing.
Well,
Chad.
look, if Ohio State's the one that turned them in, I don't know. I don't think they're doing to this extent. You better be sure that you're buttoned up and not doing the exact same thing.
Well, the scouting
it's
is
one
where,
thing to try to catch it during the game.
Right.
It's another thing to be sending Connor Stallions from the U.S. Naval Academy out as your director of intelligence as an operative across the Big Ten. You better be sure that if you're reporting someone, you're not doing the same thing.
So the executive director, Chad, of the American Football Coaches Association is Todd Berry. And let me scroll to his quote here. I'm going to admit to this. He was last a head coach at Louisiana Monroe. This is 2015. I'm going to admit to this. I would have fans that would go to opponents' games and film their sidelines and film just on their phones, their smartphones, and then send me that stuff. But he added, I didn't look at it because that was wrong. But he would, again, so when Michigan is saying others have been doing this, you have the executive director of the American Football Coaches Association admitting that he did it, and he's also calling it unethical. So I'm torn on this. When you have on the record the director of the American Football Coaches Association admitting that he would send fans with their phones, and then he would have them send it back, but he wouldn't look at it. Come on.
Why did he have him do it?
He said,
why would you have him do it if you don't look at it?
Right. I didn't look at it because that was wrong. Barry said you can call coaches paranoid. But I will tell you this. Anybody that denies it and says, oh, nobody's doing that, that is ridiculous. That's silly to even think that. So, I mean, there in that organization that he runs has 10,000 members. So he's speaking as the director of that group. I think the whole thing is you're just turning them in because they're extremely good at it, and they're not hiding it. And you hate Michigan. And you know, if they can get some meat on the bone with Harbaugh, now's the time to do it because he's not going to be there for very long. Onward to the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, look, that's certainly part of it because maybe
Isn't
they're
that interesting
better
quote,
than everyone else, but also maybe they're better than everyone else at doing it because they're doing more than everyone else in terms of their system they have in place.
Well, the closest I've heard to someone admitting that they were doing the same thing is Todd Berry sending fans instead of an operative. You know?
Yeah, again, it's the
one thing that takes it to the next level.
It's a stupid tax.
Well, but is it illegal? That's the thing that is when the coaches are like, well, it's just unethical. But is the NCAA going to be able to say this violates the very vague rule, and they kind of hint at it's not looked on favorably, but they never outright say.
Well, it's against the rules. You can't in-person scout, period. There's nothing written about sign stealing per se, but you cannot have paid employees in-person scouting. That went away in 1995. That's what they're in violation of. When this thing is written up, it's not going to say anything about stealing signs. It's going to say all the times they violated the in-person scouting rules. That's how you skirt the rule, Hutton, is send a fan. You send a fan, and then suddenly you're not doing it. They're not associated with the program. They're not on staff.
I just find it interesting that while this is going on, you have those that are saying, oh, yeah, we did it, and here's the closest thing we did, but I didn't look at it.
Well, Todd Berry sounds dumb to say that.
Again,
why would you have a fan do it and go through that effort and not look at the video?
I know. And there are other coaches in here that say they can get everything they need off of just the coaches tape, the all 22, where you can zoom in and do things. And he said, give me 3 or 4 games, I can have everything I need to know. Now, the other difference to this is you've got the guy who's doing it on the sideline with your coordinator about to call in their play, or they're going to adjust their defense or audible to something else, or make sure when the quarterback looks to the sideline, here's what we know they're about to run against you. That's the huge jump. to me.
I
it's
think,
so obvious.
I think there's been a
with all the
pretty
video.
obvious big jump here.
There is no precedent for what we're seeing here in terms of penalty and what will be the outcome of this. But more than likely, this outcome ends after Harbaugh is no longer the head coach at Michigan because he takes an NFL gig.
If you're waiting on the NCAA.
If you're waiting on the NCAA investigation. And what happens if you are a part of the Michigan program next year or the year after or whatever penalty they want to hand down? If Harbaugh's getting away with lying about what he knew or what he did not know in that statement that he sent out, allegedly. And what do you do if you're the Big Ten? If you're Tony Petitti? If you are someone that wants to flex? Because the NCAA, in theory, its perception is they don't have much power. They took a step back from that in 2021. How will that be levied moving forward if you know where we're headed, which is the power conference, and the NCAA is trying to be a part of that, but are they a part of that? We know who's in control here. It's Greg Sankey and the Big Ten commissioner, who is Tony Petitti. If you want to penalize Harbaugh and the current team, would he do that? Would he step in and do that? Or if you're the Big Ten, but I say that because he would have the support of every president, chancellor, AD, coach across the board except for Michigan in this. So he would be serving those that he is working for and speaking for on behalf of the Big Ten Conference. But you would also be hurting the Big Ten Conference for a team that can absolutely win the national championship, not just get to the playoff, but win the title this year. And you would be siding with the NCAA, almost validating what they're doing in this investigation. And is that the perception that you want to portray? I don't know if Greg Sankey would do this if roles were reversed.
He absolutely would not.
But he already has the power and authority and the speaking voice of the face of college football, for that matter, when it comes to what they're doing moving forward with the college football playoff. Everyone wants Sankey's opinion on this, what they're doing and why they want federal legislation across NIL and why we are headed towards the power super conference and why he believes it's down the road and not immediate. Again, he's got the power. He doesn't have to flex. Does the new commissioner have to do that? Or does he sit back and just allow this to happen, then allow one of his member schools to be penalized for something that happened under Harbaugh's watch? I would love to know what he would like to do versus what he's going to do.
Well, the only way that he could act right now, if you're Tony Petitti, you go to every other member institution. And if they're all coming to you and saying, this is so far beyond the pale of anything that we would ever do. This is not common. No, none of us are sending things out. Are people looking at the other sideline during games and trying to see if they can gauge what's going on? Sure. If they admitted to something, but not this. This is way too far than what he's done. I would want an assurance from Tony Petitti, from every single program and athletic director. Your house better be in order on this. Because if I act right now and I suspend Jim Harbaugh for the remainder of the season, which maybe should be done, and that costs Michigan something, a playoff spot, whatever it may be, I can't have in 6 months everyone coming back tattletelling on the other one, or the NCAA announcing an investigation into Illinois, Michigan State, Nebraska, Indiana, and everyone else, because everyone's doing it. I said yesterday, the one fallback for Michigan, whether right or wrong, and I don't think this is the case, but they would have to come back and prove that this is common. Hutton has cited a story with anonymous coaches saying it is pretty common in terms of trying to steal signs.
And some on the record, too.
Well, the director of the College Football Coaches Association, the AFCA, came out and said, I had someone do it, and they videoed, but I didn't look at it.
He sent a fan to games and then would have the fan video on his phone and send those back as a text.
About as believable as Bill Clinton saying he didn't inhale, is what I'm hearing with that. It's stupid. It makes no sense. Why would you have someone do it for a competitive advantage if you're not going to do it?
It's as believable as Harbaugh not knowing that this is going on.
It's also clearly a competitive advantage. You don't do it if it's not. This was the argument from Patriots fans. what's going on with Spygate. It's not a big deal. You're not really getting much from that. Everything's on film. No, you're doing it because it gives you an advantage. You're not going to that effort and going out of your way to circumvent a rule unless it gives you a competitive advantage. So let's cut that out right now. The only way Michigan does not look awful here, and the only way Jim Harbaugh continues to have a job coaching college football, is if there is proof and or admission from various other programs that they're up to the same stuff. And I'm not talking about, under the cloak of darkness, friends of the program, not wearing the gear, happening to tell some coach about what they've seen or what's going on. I'm talking about an orchestrated program led by a director of intelligence hired from the U.S. Naval Academy as a Marine to run ops for your football program. That's what went on here. With the amount of tickets he purchased, with the amount of games he attended, with the people he was sending out, him standing next to the offensive coordinator in one moment, then the defensive coordinator next. This was an organized operation. And
obvious.
So
how do you not notice this last year?
You've got to prove, and maybe they needed it happening multiple times in order to prove it, or someone got the video evidence they needed, along with the ticket stubs, along with the purchase, which was foolishly made in Connor Stallion's name.
But those,
a lot of these instances,
those didn't come out until after the NCAA alerted the Big Ten and Michigan of the investigation, and then Michigan suspended Connor Stalions, and then the media started looking for Connor Stalions on the Michigan sideline.
I don't know that the media – here's where my faith is in media today, right? I don't think the media looked for anything. I think they got this from the investigation. I think whoever's reported Michigan is turning over evidence they already had.
No,
or someone from the NCAA.
That's what I'm saying. That you've got the local reporters that are on the sideline with the local news cameras that you can see in the background. There's Connor Stalions next to the defensive coordinator. That's all I'm saying.
No, I'm saying the ticket purchases, things like that, where the 30 games he attended and all that. I think that's coming from the report or what the NCAA knows. That's either being tipped off by the school that reported it or the NCAA is tipping that off to a reporter is probably what's going on. It looks like they have them. Now, the only issue is, I can't even believe I'm saying this, Arnie Palmer, the Tennessee message board poster, who apparently has this nailed, in a January post claims the one rule is no one talks to Jim Harbaugh about it. That they never make direct contact with Jim Harbaugh. Plausible deniability. 2 words that are important with a lot of different issues. Plausible deniability. Jim Harbaugh may have that. Now, it's up to the NCAA or Tony Petitti, as you brought up, Hutton, and the Big Ten to decide. Do you buy that? Because you can say, no, I don't care that we don't have text from someone. You hired this guy. It's your program. There have been plenty of instances where even if there's not direct written communication or solid proof, that it doesn't matter because you're the head of the program and the old you should have known clause. Even if you're claiming ignorance, you should have known that your coordinators and assistant coaches were communicating with a guy on your staff paid by you and your program that was out illegally scouting on site. I don't see this ending well for Jim Harbaugh. Hutton, a great question you raised, though. When does it not end well for him? Does it matter because he's already taken an NFL job after Michigan wins a national championship this season and they later try to take down some banner from them? Or does it happen? Or does it happen this year?
Not at the NCAA's pace.
The only way you really punish them is do something this season.
And you take out,
because this is a possible national championship season that could be derailed.
And then the NCAA takes out the Big Ten's, possibly the Big Ten's payout for the college football playoff.
So much scandal out there. So much scandal
and detail. It continues to pile on. And it's more than just Connor Stalions went to a handful of games to steal some signs and report back to the offensive and defensive coordinator. There are now details and reports surfacing of something far a layer or two deeper into where we were just 24 hours ago, where it may not just be Connor Stalions giving his information to Michigan. It could be Michigan possibly handing over their information on signs to teams that would be facing potential college football playoff opponents, Chad.
Well, let's try to unravel this. My, the web we weave when we aim to deceive. And that is what is happening right now with Michigan. And the tentacles of this thing continue to stretch across America. This is not just an isolated Michigan story or an isolated Big Ten story. This now has national ramifications when you start to connect the dots about what may be going on here. So let's go back to January of 2023. January of 2023 is when Matt Weiss, at the time the Michigan quarterbacks coach, who is a former third-string punter from Vanderbilt, he started to be investigated for computer crimes of some sort or unlawful use of university computers. Everyone's mind immediately goes to the worst case scenario when you hear something like that, someone coming in and confiscating a hard drive, right? But what turns out to happen in this case is Weiss is fired, and he's fired, according to the USA Today, for some sort of illegal login activity on other people's devices or something that went down with that. Now, there is an outside counsel that's involved in something like this that's going through and they're sifting through all the data on the computers of Michigan football and everything else that goes into it. So now Matt Weiss is gone. Let's fast forward to yesterday, late in the day, where the Washington Post has a story about, I think it's the Washington Post. I'm trying to keep the Sports Illustrated report and the Washington Post story separate. Washington Post has a story that details a law firm is the beginning of this investigation. That it was a law firm, does not mention the law firm who it was, but that a law firm turned over information to the NCAA, and one day after that information was submitted, boom, investigation launched by both the Big Ten and the NCAA. So one could think that there is a connection between all of the information that was gathered in the Matt Weiss investigation that ended up with him being out and then leads back to a few days back where Jim Harbaugh and Michigan are under investigation for illegally scouting opponents. So we've said this throughout, but there seems to be some pretty hard level evidence that something went on here. And this is yet another example of that. Sports Illustrated has the story that details text messages from our friend Connor Stallions with a buddy of his that was turned over by the buddy that, as of 4 years ago, 2019, 2020, into COVID and after, he was bragging about doing his own research on opponents and giving information to Michigan's football program that helped them win games, I believe, during the 2020 COVID season. Now, fast forward a year later, he's hired in an official capacity at the University of Michigan. Now, watching a television feed or watching an All-22, and if you can come up with something, it's frowned upon, but it's not expressly prohibited within the NCAA rule
There's
book.
no investigation.
Right. Going on site and buying up tickets in the front row and videoing the entire game, that's a big no-no in terms of scouting and trying to steal signs. And that's what he's being accused of. And then all this happens. There's a talk of a Michigan manifesto. I've long asked, how do you get to write how does a journal entry go to a manifesto? Now we know. Connor Stallions wrote a manifesto about how he and his buddies were going to take over and run Michigan football and detailed exactly how they were going to do it. This is a pretty smart, ambitious guy, by the way, because part of the things that he did was he went and he got information from the Naval Academy on every Michigan recruit and everyone they would ever think about recruiting, and had grade information going way back, standardized test scores, and he offered this as what he called a product to Michigan in an effort to essentially say they don't know what they need until I show it to them. And when he showed this, the Michigan staff, they found this guy to be useful and eventually hired him on as what later turned out to be, maybe not completely by title, but a director of intelligence for Michigan football. And now I'm going to bring Davey Hudson on because the last part of this, and this is where this scandal goes national, is the implication that comes in a story from John Bryce of footballscoop.com. We will have John Bryce on this program a little bit later, and we're going to talk to him about this. But the implication and the report that Michigan not only scouted these opponents, but possibly aided the opposition of their possible opposition in the college football playoff in an effort to knock them out of the running of the college football playoff. Davey Hudson with us now. Davey, it's not that difficult to connect the dots here to South Carolina and Shane Beamer and the last two opponents of the season. And you've done a little bit of digging on this, and it didn't take a lot of digging. It just took looking at schedules and basing all of it off reports that are already out there.
Yes, so, Chad, as it relates to Michigan, if you were to go back to the date, November 15th, 2022, that's whenever the college football playoff rankings came out. And if you look at the top 10, you currently had 4 undefeated teams in the country at this point. You had Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, and TCU. Now, when you think about it, Ohio State, Michigan, they're going to have to play each other. But what happens in this scenario if Michigan loses and you're a one-loss team not playing in your conference championship? You're going to need some help in order to still make the college football playoff. There are 3 one-loss teams currently still left in the top 10 at this point. You have Tennessee, who was 5th. You have Clemson, who was 9th, and USC, who was 7th. Now, when you're looking at this, USC still has a very difficult schedule left. They still have to play Notre Dame. They still have to play Utah again, and UCLA, who was ranked at the time. So the odds of them winning out, very slim. But if you were to look at Tennessee and Clemson's schedule, they do not have many difficult opponents left. Now, the big thing for Tennessee in this situation is we know that Connor Stallions went to watch Tennessee play Kentucky, or at least his minions, on October 29th. So they have already scouted Tennessee. We've proven that based off all this evidence from the Sports Illustrated article. But the one common opponent that Tennessee and Clemson both have, South Carolina. Both of those teams would likely have the advantage over Michigan if they were, in fact, to lose to Ohio State, and all these teams have one loss. Now, if you look at it from just, hey, had South Carolina been very good, Tennessee, what's going to happen there? The week before South Carolina played Tennessee, they scored 6 points. They turned that around and scored 63.
Yeah, and also, Dave, you sent this to us earlier, but this is from Gators Reddit, the Florida Gators Reddit page. That posted this on X and said, surprise, Vol, Twitter isn't running with this more. The week following this alleged scouting, the South Carolina defense wore wristbands for the first time all year. Would not be the first time that Shane Beamer has gotten into trouble for accepting and using stolen information. And there's a link to a story from the AP from 2016 where Georgia fined then assistant coach Shane Beamer $25,000 for accepting leaked game plan information while at Virginia Tech 2 years prior in 2014 during that scandal. So this would not be Shane Beamer's first time accepting intelligence on an opponent in order to gain an advantage, if in fact this was the case. Look.
And the key with this is they followed that game up by beating Clemson.
Yep. Another opponent scouted by the signs were
not
stolen
just
or scouted.
one coincidence.
Right. It was nutty, that game against Tennessee, because South Carolina the week before, as the poster mentioned, got destroyed by Florida, who was not very good last year. They were reeling offensively, and suddenly they were a juggernaut on both offense and defense for a big portion of that game. Defensive players wearing wristbands for the first time. Look, we have no knowledge of this. There's not a report directly stating it's South Carolina, but it's not hard to put the dots together and say maybe it's just a gigantic coincidence that South Carolina became a completely different football team with 2 games left in their season and looked great in those 2 games and put everything together. And the wristbands against Tennessee were the secret to stopping a Tennessee offense that was previously unstoppable. Maybe all that's a coincidence, or maybe, just maybe, Shane Beamer, who had to pay a fine, or Georgia did before, for accepting illegal information from Wake Forest, maybe he got tipped off to something going on.
And in thinking back to this game, guys, the one thing that comes up for me is South Carolina's offense was rolling. But defensively, they weren't really stopping Tennessee either early in this game. It was 42-31 whenever the officials messed up that pick play call. And it pushed Tennessee back into South Carolina territory, or back in their own territory. And that's really when things started to change. I mean, as far as the connections with the wristbands and things, I mean, it looks like more than just a coincidence based on how they finished the regular season. But, I mean, if you're going to get the signs and it's going to work to some massive degree, don't we need to see a higher rate of also stopping the Tennessee offense early on, or no? I think the idea is that Tennessee's offense didn't do all that much when, in fact, I mean, they had 31 points on the board when that call happened, and then Hooker got hurt.
Yeah, and now also let's keep in mind that he's not just taking offensive signals.
Right.
The defense had been a lot better, and they were otherworldly atrocious in this game.
Yes, they were.
And Spencer Rattler completely lit them up. So, look, if you were tipped off and you know exactly when a blitz-happy team is going to blitz and where they're blitzing from based on a signal, that's a pretty easy way to exploit a short passing game and go right where the blitz is coming from and throw it there every time. And South Carolina, again, maybe complete coincidence, with Spencer Rattler was able to do that and get in the perfect play call time and time and time again in this game. Look, we're not out here just making allegations willy-nilly. We're connecting the dots. Anyone online right now could do it.
There's a lot of people doing this.
And there's a lot of reports out there that back some of this stuff up. I will say this. If the law firm that handed over all this information from the computers is what they're basing the investigation on, we will know. Time will tell. But if there's any type of electronic communication between anyone at South Carolina and anyone that's scouted for Michigan, we're going to find out about it based on the level of intelligence that was acquired by this law firm. I also see this ending in a Connor Stalions tell-all interview on HBO Real Sports or somewhere else, because this guy ain't getting a job in college football again. I think that dream is over now. This is becoming a national scandal. So what do guys that don't have anything to lose do eventually? They talk. And Connor Stalions has a lot of talking to do at some point. Now, maybe he won't because he loves Michigan so much. And that he's not going to do it to hurt his university that he loves and cares so much about. Or maybe he gets paid some money and tells all and talks about the extent to which all of this went. It's a crazy story, Hutton. And the further you dive into the rabbit hole, the more offshoots and roots there are to this that extend across the country.
And as crazy as it all is, we could be looking at an NCAA that does absolutely nothing in time for it to matter on this season, on this coach, on this story. It's a crazy sign-stealing scandal with a twist and turns every other hour, it feels like. But what's the NCAA going to do about it? You don't have a precedent set from the past, and you also have a blatant evidence where, I mean, we're even turning to what was the guy's name on the VolQuest post?
Arnie Palmer alert.
Arnie Palmer alert.
Yeah, I mean, someone behind that account is more accurate than what I believe to be accurate in regards to the NCAA actually getting it right? I have more faith in that post than I do the NCAA making this a swift decision and actually penalizing a team that would need to be enforced this year given the circumstances of what it all means. Because they would also, if you buy into the fact that they were doing it last year about the non-conference opponents and potential playoff teams, they've been doing it this year.
Yeah, they have been doing it this year. And so the law firm, if we go with the idea that it was because of the Matt Weiss investigation that someone got all this information out of the Michigan computers, that would have been taking place in January and February of 2023. So why wait until that long in the season? I don't know. But if they have that much information on it, it's a slam dunk for the NCAA or the Big Ten or anyone to act on it, if that's the case. And we'll find out if anyone else is involved in this.
When I say that,
and receiving illegal
info, it would also be
not.
going on this year, meaning like if you buy into that they were handing over the signals to other teams in order to have opponents drop, they would be currently prepared to do that, right? At least in theory. 4 games left in the season.
Well, I mean,
there's again
2 teams may have lost a shot at a college football playoff.
It changes every other hour.